Hello, everybody. This is Raun K. Kaufman, and welcome to You've Got Some Nervous System, where we uncover important aspects of mental and emotional well-being, the nervous system, and communication. And we are going to discuss today, where once a month we do this every week, but once a month we do the emotion of the month. Last month we did anger. If you want to see that, go ahead and take a look. This month we are going to do fear. We're going to do fear, my people. And we're going to talk about some important aspects to be aware of fear, how it works, and even how you can deal with it and handle it, what to do about it. Okay? So first, let's just talk about what fear is. It's the way it works in the body, in the mind, in the brain, is that when a threat or a supposed threat is detected, the amygdala, which is like an almond-shaped part of the brain that's buried deep in the temporal lobe of your brain, that gets highly activated and causes a cascade of reactions. There's a bunch of neurotransmitters that are secreted, but also some key body-wide hormones, which are cortisol. You've probably heard of that. I'm sure you've heard discussed. And also, which I'm sure you've heard of, adrenaline, or as it's known more internationally, epinephrine. And these are secreted body-wide. They cause a cascade of reactions, right? They increase the heart rate. They dilate airways for increased oxygen consumption. They drive blood flow to the muscles so that you can, escape or fight any danger that's coming. The hippocampus, which is another part of the brain, is actually, in terms of its overall area, it's small, but it is actually large in the sense that it has the most densely packed neurons in the entire brain. And there's some key things that it does. One of the key things, for instance, is that it's not where the memories are stored, but it is the thing that does the storing. It actually stores and it places the memories in a place in the brain and retrieves them. So if someone took your hippocampus, you would still have all of your memories, but you wouldn't be able to make new ones. For instance, it also attaches emotional valence to memories, which we're gonna get deeper into today. So that also works when you're in a state of fear alongside the amygdala to attach what you're experiencing as fear to specific memories. So it's storing, it's retrieving, it's doing things like that. Now, one more thing that's happening in your brain, at least, is that the prefrontal cortex, which is kind of your executive control center, this then eventually, it might not happen right at the beginning, but it eventually evaluates sort of the fear, what's going on. It can make bigger decisions about how to handle the fear or the situation or what's going on, and it can ultimately, again, in certain circumstances, help regulate and calm what is an activated system, which is what's happening when you're experiencing fear. So here's the thing to understand, just an additional piece here, which is that fear is, it's activated when we're in danger. It's part of what we're designed to feel, just like all of our emotions, right? We are emotional beings. We are designed to feel all of our emotions. So I say that because we never want to shame emotions or judge emotions, or even, I would say this, try and immediately get through and get past emotions, because we're designed to feel the emotions. We're designed to be an emotional being and to feel the whole range of emotions. And yes, that includes fear. Is it a super pleasant emotion to feel? Is it at all pleasant to feel? No, it isn't. It's quite unpleasant. In fact, many people report fear to be the most unpleasant of the unhappy emotions. Obviously, that's up for debate because that's a subjective evaluation. But a lot of people, for instance, don't have the same immediate, I've got to get out of this feeling when they feel sad or angry as they do when they feel scared or fearful. That's usually when people really want to get rid of. People I work with report this to me all the time. They don't want to feel fear. They don't want to feel it for more than a few seconds or a few minutes. They hate the feeling. They're trying to often get away from it. We're going to talk about why that's a problem a little bit later. But I want to say this about fear. So we might feel it when we perceive a danger or a lack of safety. But ongoing fear, when we're feeling it chronically, repeatedly, and for long amounts of time, then that does some things to the body and the brain that are, not healthy for it. Persistent overactivation of the amygdala, which is that part that I was saying was originally activated, can cause it to become hyper responsive to even benign stimuli. So it means we become like then more quickly activated, startled, and fearful people. That can happen if we're chronically feeling fear. Long-term cortisol secretion, when it's happening chronically over and over again, this causes all sorts of things. It causes all sorts of stress inside the body. It does things like, because remember, we're pulling all of our energy and blood toward our muscles in that moment, then what we're doing is we're actually pulling blood, energy, etc., away from the digestive system. We're pulling it away from the immune system, the deeper parts of the immune system. Actually, some of the blood gets driven to the skin, so the immune system that deals with things like cuts is more activated when we're fearful. But all the deeper things that are dealing body-wide things, that's deprioritized, as is digestion. So again, if that happens, if you deprioritize the immune system or digestion for a little while you're afraid, no problem. But if it's happening really chronically, then it can cause those kind of issues, can cause what you would imagine to happen when you're constantly deprioritizing your digestive system and your immune system. So this is just something to be aware of. The other thing that happens with chronic cortisol secretion is that it starts to reshape and ultimately cause cell atrophy and structural atrophy inside the hippocampus, which then, remember, that's the thing that puts the memories in different places in our brains and retrieves the memories, right? It's also the thing that attaches, remember, emotional valence to the memories. So then what happens if you're weakening that over time is your emotions tend to become more diffuse and less specific. Like, I could be scared of that bear I see over there. That's different than I'm just chronically afraid and anxious in my life. Now, I don't want to go too far down this road yet, because in a different month, not this month, not next month, we are going to be discussing the emotion of anxiety, which, yes, is a type of fear, but that's where we're going to go do a deeper dive in this kind of stuff. So I don't want to spend most of the time today on whether the fear is chronic or not. I just want to sort of tickle your brain a little bit, highlight this of like just being aware of that's what can happen when fear becomes very chronic and it becomes more like anxiety and dread and different things like that. It ultimately can impair our ability to process memory, retrieve memories, put things in context, and that leads to more global types of unhappiness that often feel harder to get our hands around, harder to understand, and also we can get stuck in that. So again, that's a discussion for a different day when we do a deeper dive on anxiety. Let's go back into the specifics of fear, because like I said earlier, many people describe fear as the most unpleasant emotion for them. Again, it's subjective, but the most unpleasant, they really don't want to feel it. And, I got to say, there's some cultural backing to that too. Of course, physically and physiologically, it can feel very unpleasant to be fearful. But there's also a cultural dimension, because fear is one of the most societally judged emotions, right? If we think about how society and our culture feels about sadness, I think about that, even anger, which can sometimes judged, none of them are judged the way that fear is judged, right? If you think of what's the worst thing, one of the worst things people can be called, right? A coward, right? You're the person that is fearful. You give into fear. You're scared. You're a scaredy cat, right? So there's a lot of cultural backing for judgments that we may have about fear. And I've discussed this in some past episodes, which is the idea that a lot of times in our own families, we have emotions that are permitted and emotions that are forbidden emotions, which means it's not okay to feel or express those emotions in the dynamic of the family. Now, that's not always fear, right? Like I described in the past, sometimes it's anger, so you're not allowed to feel or express anger in the family. But then there's other families where anger is the predominant way that people express themselves. But I will say that in a number of families, the forbidden emotion is fear. Not all of them, but a number of them. So there are families where you can express anger, you can be sad, but expressing fear becomes a forbidden emotion. You're not allowed to feel and express that in a way that other people can detect. So that then becomes a forbidden emotion. So then not only is society judging it, but then our families are, and then we are. So it can become very ingrained in us to be just not okay with our own fear. Not okay with our own fear. And this is more detrimental than the fear itself. Yeah, being judgmental of and trying to stamp out fear is more detrimental than the fear itself. Isn't that interesting? So we're going to talk about what we can do about that. I want to take a little bit of a left turn here, but it's a left turn that's going to take us right back onto the main road, my little snuggies. And that is Dr. Stephen Porges. Porges spelled Porges. Dr. Stephen Porges and his work with what his termed the polyvagal theory. Polyvagal spelled Polyvagal theory. But the word polyvagal is referring to the vagus nerve. I'm going to tell you a little bit about his work because I'm not going to do a deep dive on it. Maybe we'll do that on another episode, actually, because his work is awesome. You could read about his work by reading the Pocket Guide to the Polyvagal Theory. That's if you want a short one. His most recent one is called Polyvagal Perspectives. That's a little longer, but it also approaches it from not the same angle. You can also go on YouTube. You can look him up on YouTube, Dr. Stephen Porges. Stephen with a PH, not a V. And you can, he does presentations too. He's got a sharp mind, but also a good heart. I say that, I don't know him personally. I say that from his work and from what I know of his work. So let's talk a little bit, though, about polyvagal theory because it connects to fear. So polyvagal, like I said, refers to the vagus nerve. That's a nerve that goes all the way from the brain, down the back of the brain, down, of course, down the spine, then branches out into your vital organs, your facial muscles, different parts of your body. And it's called polyvagal theory because it refers to the three branches of the vagus nerve. Okay, there's a branch that deals with the parasympathetic nervous system. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, what that is. There's a branch that goes to the sympathetic nervous system, and there is a third, less talked about branch that can induce something called bradycardia, which is a really it's a sort of type of life threat experience that a person could have. And what he talks about is what happens when different branches of the vagus nerve are activated and how sometimes we can get stuck in with a certain branch of it very repeatedly activated because we kind of work into that groove where that becomes, I don't want to say the natural state of affairs, but the sort of habitual state of affairs. And so let me just say sympathetic versus parasympathetic for a second. The sympathetic is the part that activates when we are engaged, aroused, having high emotions, having high action. It can be engaged when we're doing something like playing a sport, right? Playing a basketball game or a tennis match for sure. But it is also engaged when we are scared, right? When we are scared and when we're having a big, what they call the fight or flight reaction. Now, I know a lot of people now call it fight, flight, or freeze. That's accurate. But I like separating them because freeze is actually different than the fight and the flight. But the sympathetic nervous system is the fight and the flight. So the part of you that gets scared or has a big reaction or runs away or yells at someone, right? That's what's happening there. That your heart's racing, you're feeling anxious, all of that. The parasympathetic nervous system is the part, it's actually this part of the vagus nerve that activates the parasympathetic nervous system is often called the vagal brake. I know I'm getting a little into the science here. I promise I'm going to dovetail back into the very practical things, this way that it can apply in your life. But I want to just give you the backing of what's going on so that you can engage with it in a very direct manner when you're trying to deal with your own fear. So the parasympathetic is this It's the calming part, right? It's the part that lowers your heart rate. It's the part where you feel calm or relaxed or content. Certainly the times when you feel safe. When you feel safe. That's really important, right? Because there's a big piece in our lives as relates to fear that has to do with the safe, unsafe piece. Like, do I feel safe? Do I feel not safe? Right? And then originally, it's important to understand, right? Fear is, like all emotions, it's designed to help us, and all unhappy emotions, fear, anger, sadness, etc., are messages from our nervous system. This is not Dr. Porges. I'm now jumping out of Dr. Porges. I'll come back to him in a second. This is not polyvagal theory, but this is my work and Kate C. Wild's work that we do together. So all of those so-called unhappy emotions are messages from our nervous system. And they are our nervous system saying something is out of whack and there's something that we have to do or have or notice to get back in sync. That's what an unhappy emotion is. So it's not a bad thing. It's your nervous system actually communicating with you and trying to help you survive. So that's what's happening. And Dr. Porges would second that, I believe, because that's his whole point about what's happening when people are going through, he deals with people recovering or dealing with trauma. He's also more newly gone into not new anymore, but a little bit later, he went in, applying polyvagal theory to autism. I've talked about that in past lectures that I've done as well. But when he's talking about this, he's talking about, hey, we have these three branches. We want to be aware of when they get activated. Let me just finish these three branches so you know what I'm talking about. The second branch, like I said, I say second branch. It's in no particular order. So we'll just, for this discussion, the first branch activates the sympathetic nervous system. The second branch activates the parasympathetic nervous system. Like I said, that's often called the vagal brake. That lowers everything, calms everything. And actually, if we didn't have the vagal brake, our resting heart rate would be closer to 100 beats a minute. The reason why our resting heart rate is more like 60 or 65 beats a minute, or whatever yours is because the vagal brake is taking it lower than it would naturally go, even if you were resting. Even if you were like hanging out, laying in bed watching TV, your heart rate would still be at around 100, could even be higher, even if you were resting and even if you weren't stressing about anything without the vagal brake. So the vagal brake is actually crucial for our well-being. So that's that. Now the third and final one is the least talked about one, branch of the vagus nerve I'm talking about here. That final one is what Dr. Porges says, it's the part that engages when we feel severe life threat. And it actually doesn't cause a jump in the heart rate. It causes a super lowering, bradycardia, super lowering of the heart rate. That is what's happening when we see mammals. I'm talking about, mice or deer or whatever, when they, quote, play dead or freeze, right? People talk about it as if it's the animal's complicated strategy. Oh, the lion has me in its mouth. I'm gonna be really thoughtful here. I'm gonna play dead. This is how we talk about animals, right? I'm gonna play dead so the lion thinks I'm dead and maybe it'll leave me alone. That is, in a sense, a happy accident. It's no longer in a sense, it's a happy accident that the lion might think they're dead and leave them alone. Evolutionarily, this is part of why this has evolved for mammals. But that is not what's going on in the animal's head. It's not thinking a deep strategy about that while it's in the jaws of the lion, right? What's actually happening is something on a nervous system level, something on an autonomic level rather than a conscious, deeply planned out strategy. I'm talking about this freeze response here or this play dead response. And what that is the heart rate drops super low, the body goes into a shutdown, and that's when that third branch of the vagus nerve is activated. Now, why am I telling you all of this? Oh, one more thing I want to say about, two more things really quickly that I'll say about Dr. Porges' work, and then I'll say why I'm talking about this. One of the terms he says that he uses that I really like is called a neuroception. It's the deep nervous system's perception of safety or lack thereof, right? You might say there's a neuroception of safety or there's a neuroception of unsafety or lack of safety. And this is really important because when the nervous system perceives safety, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, calms itself and calms the body. And when it perceives lack of safety, it activates one of the other two branches, either the sympathetic nervous system, causing you to fight or run or have a big reaction, or if the threat is deemed life-threatening, very, very intense, then that complete kind of shutdown type response. Okay, so the neuroception, I just want to highlight that because it's that deep perception of safety, which goes back to how fear isn't some sort of not only not something we want to judge, but it's not even like a human weakness. It's programmed into us evolutionarily. Now, again, how we deal with fear, how we handle it, and even how long we're in it, that's not programmed. We have a lot of control over that. But the fact that fear exists as an emotion that we can feel goes deep into our evolutionary roots, right? In fact, that goes even deeper than, like, farther back than even being mammals. But all the three branches, including this parasympathetic branch, is a particular mammalian, according to Dr. Porges, a mammalian type of attribute or trait. So this is the kind of thing where we don't want to, this is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. And it's not something that we're going to sit around and sort of go, oh, I think I'm going to feel fear now, etc. Right? It's something the nervous system might detect a lack of safety, and then it's going to activate the amygdala, etc. But then we have lots of choices we can make once that happens, which we're going to talk about in a second. So that's that part. Okay. Oh, neuroception. And the last piece that I wanted to say about Dr. Porges' work is he does a lot of work with feelings of safety or lack of safety, with the neuroceptions of safety or lack of safety. And this is important because, this comes back to, we are going to be much more likely to have our fear response engaged if we're perceiving a lack of safety. That probably won't surprise you, right? But what might surprise you is that there are all kinds of things like that we can do to tell our nervous system that we're safe. Right? And I don't mean yelling at your nervous system and going, you're safe, you're safe. I'm not talking about that kind of response, but there are ways we can respond to things and ways we can regulate ourselves that help tell the nervous system that we're safe. And then once the nervous system feels that it's safe, it's going to not be activating the same, our sympathetic nervous system in the same way, and certainly not our life threat system, right? So this is what you want to be aware of. There's that. Now I want to talk about I want to come back to our work with fear and what this means and how you can maybe perceive it differently and handle it differently. Okay. There's nothing wrong with fear. There's nothing wrong with fear. Actually, even if you feel it a lot, there's nothing wrong with fear, right? It's okay to be afraid. It's not a human weakness. It's built into us as part of our capacity, right? But it's really awesome to know what's going on and then what we can do about it. And here's the place I want to start, which is fear is not something to immediately be gotten rid of. Like, we got to get past the fear. I'm feeling fear. I don't want to feel it. Let's get through it as quickly as possible. It's not about that. We're all, you're going to feel fear at different times. What is amazing, what would be incredible, and what can be truly like world-changing, life-changing for you is if, instead of trying to get away from fear when you feel it, if you are actually move toward it and allow yourself to fully feel it. I'm not saying you have to do more of the thing that you're afraid of. When I say move toward it, I don't mean physically. I'm talking about emotionally, move toward it, right? Which means allowing yourself to feel the fear. And again, I want to remind you, there's more discussion that would be had here about things like chronic anxiety. That's going to be discussion for a different day. I'm talking about more general fear here, but which is allowing yourself to feel the fear. Oh, and I want to do one more disclaimer. If you have a diagnosed mental illness, right, that you're either getting medication for, you're seeing a therapist for, think about what I'm saying, but doesn't mean do this particular strategy I'm about to describe to you. If you have a diagnosed mental illness, talk to your therapist or doctor before you do anything that I'm recommending that you do. Okay, if you don't, try this out. So when you have fear, first is see if you can start to get in the habit of just not judging it, not thinking it's bad, not thinking it's something that needs to be gotten away from. Now, this is going to be hard for a lot of you because you're going to feel like, but I don't like this feeling. I don't like this feeling. I don't want to feel this feeling. I don't want to have it. I don't want to feel it. And I understand that that's okay. It's okay to not like the feeling. It's okay to even have an initial urge to try and get away from it. I get it. There's nothing wrong with that. But this is the cool thing you're going to start to notice. If you don't immediately judge it and try and move away from it, if you don't even just immediately like, oh, I hate this feeling, I don't want to feel this way. If you just allow the feeling to be for a little bit, and by a little bit, I just mean a few minutes, you're going to start to notice some things. You're going to start to notice, for instance, that it's unpleasant, right? Super uncomfortable to feel it, but it's not the end, right? It's not going to kill you. It's not completely intolerable, right? It's just an unpleasant feeling. And I get it. Nobody loves an unpleasant feeling, but you can handle it, right? It's an unpleasant feeling to get a shot that you need to get at the doctor, right? It can be an unpleasant feeling to exercise, right? Especially if you're not already in shape, right? The more in shape you are, the better it feels. But if you're not in great shape, it can feel quite painful to exercise, right? But a lot of us can be with that pain, right? So we want to be aware that, like, yes, feeling something unpleasant isn't awesome, isn't a great feeling, but it's something that can be felt and can be handled, and you're gonna live through it. It's gonna be okay, even if you feel something unpleasant for a while, right? And I remember back in my 20s, I was really stressing, freaking out about a breakup that I had just gone through, and the person I'd just broken up with was now with someone else, and it was like, oh, I was going nuts about it. And I had a friend who was helping me, and he said, I said, like, I'm feeling so stressed. What if I still feel this way, like, in a year? By the way, spoiler alert, that's not what happened. But that's what I was worried about, right? And he said, I thought he was going to start to tell me, like, oh, but why do you think you're going to necessarily feel it for a year, or you're probably going to feel it for less than that? That's not what he did. He did a really cool thing, which is he said, okay, you might. What's so bad about that? And it was the first time I actually ever sat with that, was like, oh, yeah, this is super unpleasant feeling, but if I felt it for a while, it would be okay. Like, I would live through it. I would survive that. And as soon as I did that, interestingly enough, the intensity of the emotion quite rapidly dissipated. I'm not saying I completely got over it and never had an issue again, but actually it dramatically dissipated for me. It was the first good night. As soon as I had that conversation, I was about to go to sleep, and I had been not sleeping well for quite some time because of this breakup and all the stuff I was doing in my head about it. But once this happened, I laid in bed and I was asleep within 10 minutes, and I slept through the whole night. It was the first night in that episode that I had done that. And actually, I really had the same issue in that way again. I'm not saying I never got upset about a breakup again. This is before I met my wife and stuff. Of course I did. But I didn't have that like intensity of fear that and I can't handle it. I never had that again. So you're going to be surprised if you just allow the feeling. Now, let me give you a little bit of a tip of a way you can allow it, rather than just going like, okay, I'm supposed to allow the fear. Here's what you can do. This will give your mind a place to focus as you're having the fear. Instead of, like, rather than just saying, I'm going to feel the fear, start with that. I'm going to allow this fear. This fear is not bad for me. It's just my nervous system. Just my nervous system communicating with me. It's just saying something's out of whack, and there's something for me to do or have or notice to get back in sync, right? So I'm going to say that, and then I'm going to, if you're up for this is up to you, of course, you're going to focus in and notice where you feel the fear. If you focus inward, you're going to notice where you feel it. You might feel it in your stomach. I normally feel it like in my kind of upper stomach, solar plexus area. But that's not true for everybody. You might feel it in your lower stomach. You might feel it in your chest. You might feel it in your throat, right? There's no like correct answer, but you are going to feel it somewhere, or maybe more than one place in your body. When you notice that, dive into that, like, meaning just pay attention to it, notice it. You're not trying to get rid of anything. You're just trying to notice it. You're just trying to notice it. And that's the key first step, is just noticing it. noticing that physical sensation and bringing your attention there. You're gonna find some interesting things happen there, which is, like I said, often you will find the emotion, the intensity of the emotion dissipates. I do want to do a disclaimer here, which is that you may find, this has happened to me many times, as you start to pay attention like that, at first your fear may increase. I want to warn you about that. If you follow through with it, it probably won't increase for very long. I'm talking about a couple of minutes. The reason it will increase at first is because you've been stepping on and suppressing and repressing the emotion. Your nervous system's trying to get that emotion to you. By the way, when you are chronically stepping on, repressing, or trying to avoid or ignore an emotion, your nervous system's still trying to get this message to you guys. So what does that mean? That means if you're doing that, suppressing or ignoring, avoiding, doing that in a particular emotion, your nervous system, because it's trying to take care of you, has only one choice. It has to raise the volume of the signals that it's sending you. But conversely, if you start to fully feel it and pay attention to it, your nervous system realizes pretty quickly, oh, this is no longer being stepped on or ignored, so I can lower I don't have to keep raising the volume of it. Right? So that's a really cool thing you're going to find. But at first, you might notice an increase in the fear because you're letting it in for the first time. Right? So you're now getting the full force of that signal from your nervous system. But if you stay with it for just a short time, I'm not talking about an hour, I'm talking about a few minutes, you will get up to the other side of that hump. And most people, the vast, vast, vast majority that I work with, report to me that then they start to feel it dissipating. Now, am I saying that means then immediately all your fear will disappear? You won't have fear anymore? Of course not. Remember, guys, the object is not to never have fear again. Fear is part of the human experience and it's part of the nervous system. You're going to have it again. That's the thing. Let's not make it the enemy. You are going to have it again. The key thing is to make peace with it, create a good relationship with your fear, right? And actually allow it to happen. And I will acknowledge this too, also not to get stuck in it, right? That doesn't mean the feeling of fear is in any way bad or not good. But like I was saying earlier, when we get stuck in loops on it and we feel like we can't get out, that's true for any emotion, right? We're not just emotional beings. We're beings that are designed to transition from emotion to emotion. So getting stuck in any emotion isn't going to be ideally healthy, right? That doesn't mean the emotion is bad, right? It doesn't matter if you're eating broccoli is really, really good for you, right? But if all you eat is broccoli and you're eating a ton of broccoli, at some point it becomes unhealthy. That even happens with water, right? Water is incredibly good for you, incredibly important. But if you drink too much water too fast, you can kill yourself, right? So anything, if you get stuck in it, can be unhealthy, right? But that doesn't mean just because drinking too much water can kill you, that doesn't mean, hey, be careful about water. We don't want to drink water, right? Right? So this is what you want to realize about this. So we want to allow this fear. We want to notice it. We want to tune into where it's activating in us and just pay attention to that. That's the most important step. If you can just do that, you're going to notice you start to have a different relationship with your fear. Start to welcome it. You can even say, if you want, oh, hey, fear, how you doing? I see you, buddy. Hi, fear, right? And just notice it. This is all the first order of business. I'm not saying this is the only thing. Fears can come from deep-seated trauma. Fears can come from deep mental or emotional issues that we might have that have been long-standing in our life. This doesn't mean don't address those and resolve those. I work with people on that stuff every day. Of course, it's important to address those. I'm talking about first steps here. First steps is we want to feel. What many people try and do with fear is they try and either act their way out of it or think their way out of it. And you can't do that with fear, right? You can only feel your way out of it at first, right? So and in fact, it's probably a contradiction to say feel your way out of it, because we're not trying to get out of it. We're trying to fully feel it and let it move through us. That's what these emotions are for. They're designed to be fully felt, but then move through us. They're designed to be fully felt, but temporary. Okay? Fully felt and temporary and transitory. All of our emotions are like that. We want them to be fully felt, but also transitory, right? any emotion. So that comes with making peace with our emotions, right? Then we can receive the message from our nervous system. Our nervous system doesn't have to keep yelling at it, yelling at us, doesn't have to escalate it. And we can move through our emotions and have kind of like a healthy emotional life, right? So sometimes what we try to do, like I said, we try to think our way out of it or feel our way or do our way out of it, like act our way out of it. Act our way out of it means we try and distract ourselves by doing something, right? I'm sure you've experienced that. And think our way out of it means we try and kind of problem solve our way out of it and what this usually leads to is rumination. We'll have another episode about rumination for sure. But what that does is we start thinking, well, what if this happens? Or what if I do that? Well, how can I solve this? Or how can I get this person to stop yelling at me? Or what if I don't show? What happens if this happens? And we go back over things, and that ultimately doesn't think our way out of it. It leads to more stress, right? So this is what you want to be aware of. Fear is not something to be outsmarted and think your way out of it. It's something that needs to be felt and then move through us. Right? And you'll notice this, right? That fear is it's an emotion that is very oriented toward the future, right? You're afraid of something that will happen, or it could even be is about to happen. Like if you see a bear, or something in the future that might happen in a week, right? In our minds, I'm not saying it will happen, right? We think it will happen. We think it could happen. That's not true for all emotions, right? If you look at, for instance, just as an example, anger and sadness, those tend to be past-directed emotions, right? Or sometimes in the present. But fear is very different. Fear is oriented toward the future. So we try and think our way out of it by thinking a lot about the future, thinking we're going to think and plan our way out of the fear. All that does is cause more rumination and cause us to ignore the message that we need to hear from our nervous system. Right? That's the key piece. We got to hear that message. We got to listen to that message. So once you've done that, there's a couple of other things you could do. I mean, again, I'm not talking about, if you wanted, let's say you were going to work with me do a bunch of one-on-one sessions, we can go into the deeper causes of your particular fear, right? Of course. But I'm not gonna do that in this episode of You've Got Some Nervous System, right? We're just talking about the overarching general ideas here. But I want to tell you two other things you can do. That first thing is the fully feeling it, and noticing where it is in your body and just paying attention to that. Now, once you've done that, there's some things you can do here. So number one is you can breathe into wherever you notice that tightness and that fear being focused. Right? And you're going to notice things about it. Maybe the fear might have a color. It might be red. It might be green. It might be black, right? You're going to notice that it might feel like rough or sharp, or it might have a different sensation. You're going to notice attributes of it once you focus in on it. So then what you want to do is let's say, like me, you feel it in your solar plexus. So then you want to just, if this is only if you want to take the other steps. The first step is the most important. If you only take the first step, that's great. And you'll get better at it the more you do it. But if you wanted to take a second step, you then just breathe into that area and breathe out from that area. That's it. You're just breathing into that area and breathing out from that area. That's true if you feel it in your throat too. If you feel it in your throat, you're going to breathe into your throat, breathe out from your throat. Now, some of you may be going, what do you mean breathe into my throat? The air goes into my lungs, it doesn't go into my stomach, it doesn't go into my throat. Of course, the air goes into your lungs. There's no other place it's going to go, right? But I'm talking about you're visualizing this and imagining it. Yes, in real life, the air is going to go into your lungs. But if you are tight in your throat and you breathe into your throat, you just imagine that's where the air is going into, and you imagine that's where the air is going out from. That's sending different signals back to your nervous system, back to your body. So that will often enable some kind of relaxation there. And the more that area can relax, you're going to notice the less fearful you feel. Because fear is body-wide, right? Fear is not just up here. Fear is everywhere. So the more you can relax the thing that's clenching, the less intense the emotional experience will be. It's fascinating. It took me a while to realize that. One other thing I just want to highlight that I think would be definitely Dr. Porges approved. Not definitely, I don't know him personally, would be this idea that Part of what's also happening, remember, is you're having that neuroception of lack of safety if you're fearful. So changing your environment can be really helpful. Sometimes, obviously that may mean changing your bigger environment, like the environment you're in with, the family you're around, the people you're around, the job you're around. But I'm not even talking about that today. When I say change your environment, I just mean change your environment in the moment. So if you can go into a different room, if you can go somewhere, drive in your car, or even just go into the bathroom, not go into the bathroom or do something and distract yourself, not go on a drive and now listen to a podcast, not go into the bathroom and now watch movies on your phone, right? Remember, that pulls you away from the fear. But changing the environment, what that can do is it can change some of the signals that your nervous system is getting so that your nervous system can start to have a perception of, hey, we're not in danger any longer. That's why I'm saying that, because what's happening in our lives, and you guys, I think you guys know this, is that we're pretty rarely in actual physical danger. Some of us are. Some of you have had serious traumas when you were younger or even more recently. That's true. But and that is real threat. That is real threat to you. But a lot of times what's happening is we're just in a situation where we are imagining threats, or we think there's threats, or we think that something, if we lose our job, then X, Y, and Z will happen. So some of that is in our mind, right? And doesn't mean it's the truth. But the emotion, that doesn't mean the emotion is not the truth. Like, doesn't mean the emotion should be stamped out. It just means we're putting ourselves in lots of situations in our current society where we perceive a lack of safety, but we're not in literal, immediate physical danger, right? This is incredibly common in our current society, right? This gets, by the way, worsened by things like we're not moving as much as we're meant to. We're eating things that are throwing our system off in a lot of ways. So it makes it even more likely that we are going to be easily swayed into perceiving that we are not safe, right? So that's why this underlying thing of getting to a feeling of safety, it's one of the things I work with people on, is so important for like long-term mental and emotional health. But in the short term, just changing your immediate environment can start to change the signals, at least the signals you're getting right now, that then that are helping to drive the fear. Now, remember I said that doesn't mean you're going to listen to a podcast, you're going to watch a movie, whatever. What I would recommend, it's up to you, is change the environment, but still stay with the fear, which is, well, you might notice, for some of you, you might notice something cool happens there. If you change the environment, but stay with the fear will still be there. But again, you'll notice a dissipation in the intensity of it, right? Because now some of those signals of lack of safety are not there anymore. So you'll be able to, it'll also make the fear more like, feel to you more manageable and more feelable. Remember though, fear is always manageable. Like fear, again, unless you have, like I said in the disclaimer earlier, unless you have a diagnosed mental illness, fear is a manageable emotion, and manageable in a sense that it can be felt and it's not going to hurt you or kill you or hurt anybody else, right? So you'll notice, so let's try this. This is the last thing I'll say about this. You want to see not if you can get rid of your fear, get over your fear, but if you can start by having a better relationship with your fear, a better relationship with your fear. And if you do that, I think you will be really pleasantly surprised at what comes from that. Okay, so I hope that was helpful for you. Remember to, if you would, it would really help us. It would help people have access to this if you could like and subscribe. Subscribe would be great. You get regular notices about this. And yes, share it with someone whom you think this would be relevant to. That would be really, really appreciated. And I will see you guys next week.